Yeah. Um, yeah, like the Milo for me was such a like eye-opening experience, just so many different things. So I'm getting a chance to talk to you right now. I got a chance to work with Jim Schmitz,
Oh
who
yeah.
wrote for Milo
Hmm.
for years.
Yep.
When I lived and worked in Oakland, California, he was there, and he had some, very like, personal trainings type stuff, and he had working for this guy, and I had been hired to work there as well. And so you'd see, he was there, like that was him, and he
Yep.
did my USA weightlifting certification while I was still at university. And Butch Curry was there, he was a
Yep.
1980 Olympian, and just an unreal experience with them at Humboldt State. And then I'm working with them, and yeah, it was just sort of like you just meet these legends, and he's a very simple guy. He's got a clipboard, and he knew what personal training was in the Bay Area. There's some ladies that really wanted to get fit, and he had an
Yep.
exercise routine for them, and just like, here you go, there, okay, do it. Sort of disappointing, you're like, gosh, this is the guy, like this is him, this is what he's
Yeah.
doing with these people. And but if you go to the Sports Palace, there was like a,
Uh-huh.
you go underneath there, and go to a weightlifting session, and he's a different guy, just an unreal like teacher. And the atmosphere and the athletes that he had there, it wasn't anything like that. So he knew, I learned a lot from him, knowing that what you do to pay the bills as a fitness expert and what you love don't always line up. So you've got to
That's true.
diversify a little bit. And if someone's willing to pay you $100 an hour to stare at the back of a machine and watch the weights up and going down, then sometimes you've got to do those things.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember that article. Actually, 5 4 3 2 1 done would be the Jim Schmitz article that I remember mostly from those Milo days as well. So that's firmly embedded in
Yeah.
in my knowledge as well. So it's really interesting that when you, like, I've met a few of those people. I had Lynn Jones do my US weightlifting certification club coaching course when I was did that in the United States quite a few years ago. And obviously Lynn had come from Australia, and he was one of my very early mentors. When I was doing my master's degree, I was didn't know much about Olympic lifting at all. So I thought, and still to this day think, that when you want to know something about particular area that you're not 100% sure of, you basically go to the people who do that every day of their life. So I wanted to find out about Olympic weightlifting because I was doing my master's degree in integrating skill training and Olympic lifting in training for hammer throwing. So I went straight down to the telephone, then went to the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra, and they basically opened up their extensive knowledge, both Lynn Jones and Harry Wardle, to this what was I, would have been late 20s, late 20s, who basically knew nothing about Olympic weightlifting other than what he taught himself from the pages of the NSCA over the previous number of years. And they started my interest in Olympic weightlifting and how I can utilize it towards sports performance. And then I've integrated that in probably quite a bit of my programming ever since.
Yeah, it's my introduction to it was sort of the bigger, faster, stronger program.
Mm-hmm.
Having the workouts and the a lot of things that sort of overlap now with what lots of people say is sort of setting daily goals, a daily maximum, doing lots of little things so that they add up to big things, and then the big three lifts of bench and squat and clean and jerk. I thought was just blew my mind, like how like confident and powerful you can make yourself. And I was a very slow 40-meter dash, like very heavy set kid. And my grandmother owned a pizza factory, which was not great for the body comp. And my parents weren't particularly athletic, so I had a lot working against me. But yeah, 14, 15 years old, and like you get to the gym at 6 a.m. and that was, 4 or 5 days a week all through high school, and it added up. So that was, but that, yeah, those sessions were, that was early on for me. And then, just reading and from then on about who else was doing it, and well, Barry Sanders, back squats this, or he's got a little, parallel squat of that, and that sort of thing. And that became the goal then, to be like those guys.
Well, it's actually interesting because I'm fairly similar. I played rugby since I was 8 years old, and I was in a national tournament in under 15s, and some guy came up to me, and I'd never met him before, and said that if you continue the way you're going, then there's a fair chance that you'll get selected to the Australian under 16 team at the next year's state titles, which obviously was all the motivation I needed to ensure that that summer was my preparation period to play rugby as to the best of my ability coming up. And similarly, I was not gifted athletically whatsoever, but I think from my parents, I got a fairly solid work ethic that if you want something, you work hard and do your best to get it. So I started running and lifting, and was fortunate that I went to a very, very good powerlifting bodybuilding gym in Brookvale, suburb of Sydney, Australia, where I grew up. And there was a guy called Vince Basile, who was a former Mr. Canada. He owned the facility, and it was called American Health Spa. And it was quite ironic that it was American Health Spa and owned by a former Mr. Canada, French-Canadian guy. And there was two powerlifters in the gym, Dennis and Pat. I never did get to know their surnames, but Dennis and Pat were probably in their 40s at that time, and I was just turning 15, so I was the young pup in the gym. And if I did anything poorly as far as technique, I got a clip around the ears, and was basically told in no uncertain terms that the technique has to be the first thing you think about, not the load on the bar. And that's obviously stayed with me all my career. And these guys really established some fairly firm, solid foundations of what you need to do to lift. And then I found Bill Starr's Strongest Shall Survive, and then I was completely hooked. And then eventually I was fortunate to be named captain of that Australian rugby union team as an under 17. And it just showed that someone with very little skill set could actually supplement that by working hard physically to make up for any deficiencies in the skill. And if you can hang in there long enough, you go see basically, I guess, becomes that term that hard work beats talent when talent don't work hard. So I was definitely the work hard with the no talent, and was fortunate enough to get to that level, and have maintained sort of a lot of the ideas from back in those days to this present day. So.
Yeah, it seems to be a very common story, you know. It's just falling in love with the iron and what it can do for you, like mentally and physically, and it's a lot of life lessons, you know, trying to dig deep and get through things when you don't think you can. So,
well,
yeah,
I think you mentioned confidence, which I think is the biggest thing. I mean, Joe Ken always says that the only thing that transfers from the weight room to the field is confidence, and I'm a huge fan of Joe Ken over the last few years, and I think he's 100% correct that if you have the confidence to load up 200 plus kilograms in your squat and to nail it, you know you can face most things on a rugby field anyways.
Yeah, shouldn't be scared of anything other than Nemani Nandolo running down the wing at you. I don't know if anyone's got that in them, but
well, fortunately he wouldn't run in my channel. I'd be a lot closer to the middle of the field.
Yeah, he was a crusader for a little bit. He was terrorizing people down there doing that. Yeah, that's an unreal. But yeah, it's Joe Ken. I think he gets quite a few confident athletes that come through where he's at now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, anyone that I've spoken to or had a chance to meet him at various conferences through the Iron Neck, you know, like every once in a while you get to meet, you know, like watch Bill Gillespie bench press 900 pounds, like in just like during lunchtime, you know, like you go walk over there and he's got 450 kilos in the bar and he's like, well, he attempted like 1050, 1,000 plus pounds and missed it. 3 months later, he did 1030. And he was, I could have thrown a rugby ball at him from where I was sitting, and mm-hmm. He was just sort of going about it and answering questions as in between sets, you know, very casual 400 plus kilo bench in his bench shirt, you know, and yeah, and then yeah, just like, but yeah, he's and like just a humble guy, like very religious guy, and you know, just very like, oh well, I'm very blessed, and I was like, well, you also, you know, like you're unbelievable work ethic, and working for Sorinex now, he is, I think, but yeah, Joe Ken and those types of guys are just, again, like the nicest guys. You know, they volunteer to come to the high school, you know, Strength and Conditioning Association National Convention. You know, drove there and gave a talk and walked around and just met other strength coaches and answered questions. You know, I mean, from the most mundane programming thing to, you know, his philosophy as a strength coach, and sits down with a guy called, you know, Travis Mash pretty regularly on the podcast, which again is great, like just free answers to all of your questions every day.
Yeah. Well, so it should be, really. I mean, if you don't give back, what's the point of learning the things that you've learned in the first place? I mean, I've been sort of criticized by some people about giving what they consider to be trade secrets in articles that I write about programming and what we've done. But I've always believed that if you tell people what you're doing, they can't replicate exactly what you're doing because it's yours in the first place. So you've got a much better understanding of the nuances of working with people and working with the program yourself. But it also forces you to be better than you were last year because you've actually given the rest of the competition, per se, the program that you worked with last year. It's not necessarily going to be the program I'm going to work with next year. I'm going to tweak it a wee bit and take a few things out and add a few things. And I think about 80% of what I do, I've been doing for 20 odd years or more, but that 20% is a little bit more fluid. So if I see something that I'm really interested in, or if I see something that is a new piece of equipment, which I think I might be able to utilize, I'll surely add it into the mix and to see if it actually does what I had hoped it would do. If it doesn't, then that is discarded, and then something else will come on into the programming for the following year, and then I'll talk about things and put a few ideas on paper and share them around. And when I found Elite FTS, what's that, back in 2013 was my first article for Elite FTS, and I couldn't be happier with the way that they've done things with the articles that I write. I mean, there's some great, Sheena, who's the managing editor there, she does some wonderful things with putting my scratchings into something that can be understood and looks half decent. So, I mean, she's wonderful. And to have that sort of, I guess, exposure to the US market, and to have people write in the comments section of the articles that they're utilizing a lot of my rugby related things into American football, is just, for me, it's like a wonderful transfer of information from the sport, which obviously is only slightly known in the United States and getting better all the time with the MLR, but it's now being used in other sports, so which is great to see.
Yeah, what you said there about, you know, giving it away, and you know, if you give them the plans, they're still going to have to build it. There's, you know, they still have to go through the work and the dedication, I think. So again, like for me, I think it's awesome to hear that, and to, you know, the amount of stuff that you shared with me, not knowing who I was, you know, right off the bat was a bit overwhelming. Like it took me a week to sort of scan through it because I wanted to sort of nerd out on it, you know, and sort of picking through it. And so in there, there's it all in one, you know, sort of email. You can inspire someone, you know, to look at things differently. You can validate the things that you've been doing as a coach, and I can look at some of the stuff and say, yeah, I've been doing this too. And So that, again, like as American rugby player and coach now, that is something that I think that America just doesn't really, the American rugby community is, they want to pick up, a playing system, or they want to pick up a program or something like that. And, everyone's going crazy over this 1-3-3-1. And it's like, yeah, but the All Blacks were running that in 2013 to 2017, like other people have stolen it. Like it had its merits there, but they did it for a reason, like if you had Kieran Reid in America running down the outside channel and Richie McCaw scanning in between every ruck, then yeah, you could do almost anything you wanted to do, really.
Yeah.
But it's more about sort of a learning process and the why. Like, why did they run that system? Is well, like who they had, like look at the athletes that they had and the experience that they had, and they're not going to run it this year. They're not going to, they're not going to dust it off for anybody. So
No.
I think it's sort of that copy and paste attitude sometimes.
Yeah, I think the really, really good coaches around the world, they have their own plan. They have their own belief system in what works, but they're also wise enough to realize that it won't necessarily fit the group that they currently have. So you change the plan slightly to fit the group, or you come up with new ideas to fit the group. And initially, I guess when I was with the Crusaders, we wanted to work on maximal strength because I didn't think their strength was that good at all to begin with. So the program was geared towards maximal strength development, but it doesn't stay there. And as everyone knows, I'm a huge fan of Westside and the conjugate system. So when that came more and more to the forefront of my philosophies and trainings, was really, well, if we stop doing maximal strength completely, we're going to start losing it. So we basically have to maintain an element of that. It's not necessarily the priority number one anymore. It could be priority number 2 or number 3. And for this person, it might be different to that person. And as Coach G said in a comment on the latest article on Elite FTS this morning, was it's all about the holy grail of team sport programming is individualization. And everyone says they individualize, but I don't often see it to the level that you'd like to see it. And I don't do it myself. I'll be about to go into my 30th preseason as a professional coach. And I think this preseason with the Houston SaberCats, I will get as close to individualization that I've ever been able to achieve with any group. But again, that's not going to be 100% individualized. It's often just myself and my assistant, Josh Schnell, will be the only S&C staff there. So when you've got a squad of 35 players, it becomes that a little bit more difficult to manage that. But at least we're trying to make some attempts and some efforts to ensure that it becomes a needs-based program, not an Ashley Jones-based program. We can add elements here if it sort of evolves in the fact that, for example, if you're a hooker and you miss the target 2 or 3 times out of 10, you're not going to be the number one hooker in any team in the world, because you want to hit that, you want to nail that throw from the into the line out as close to 100% as you possibly can. So why are you having difficulties throwing? Let's go back one step. Why are you having problems? Is it because you've spent so much time working on maximal strength of the bench press that you're lacking some sort of shoulder flexibility when you throw? Or is it a technical area that the forwards coach can correct? So maybe you're strong enough at the present point in time, and by doing another strength session is going to be sort of detrimental to your performance. So why don't we just pull one strength session out and give you a 45-minute one-on-one with the forwards coach? That's to me is individualization. When you don't need to do all the strength program, we might run a 4-day pre-season, off-season program, but for you it might be 3 days and an extra session with the forwards coach, or it could be an extra conditioning session because your current Bronco time is 6 minutes 15, and we need you around 5 minutes 15. We need to improve your aerobic metabolism. So it's looking at all the pieces of the puzzle, and the puzzle keeps changing. It's not the same puzzle, and the pieces change shape every single team you work with and every single year you work with the team. So if the pieces all fitted together nicely last year, you might find that they don't fit together well this year, because we basically turn over 25% of our playing staff. So we might have to adjust a few things to make the puzzle to be able to be seen. And I guess that's the big difference between knowledge and wisdom. People acquire knowledge over time, but wisdom is, to me, is the application of that knowledge to make a program suitable for the group of people that you're currently working with. And I think I keep hearing Brian O'Driscoll's famous interview about the difference between knowledge and wisdom in the back of my head. And that's one of the classics of all time. But that's probably pretty true in that, for those who haven't heard it, Brian O'Driscoll said that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is not using a tomato in a fruit salad. So it's that sort of, and that's what makes it fun for me still. I turn 60 next year, and I don't want to stop, because it's so much fun, particularly the preseason. But preseason is an S&C coach's time to shine, and it's changing those puzzle pieces to make a new picture every single year, which I think is really gratifying. And then to look at performance on the field, and obviously pre-season should flow into in-season, and everything's about the performance on a Saturday or whatever day you play. And if you can't answer the why yourself as a strength and conditioning coach or a head of performance, that a player comes up to you, and players are a lot more savvy as far as S&C is concerned now. They'll ask really, really good questions. When I was with Scotland and Edinburgh a few years ago, I had two of my players, that Alistair Dickinson and Ross Ford, who were studying master's degrees in strength and conditioning at the time. So they're going to be asking some really, really good questions that force you to assess why you're doing things, and looking at reasons behind that. And if you can't give a reason for the why, then why are you doing it in the first place? So that's become a really great deal of satisfaction for me over the years.
Yeah, well, just touching on Houston, how did Houston come up on the radar? I mean, you've been all over the world and done so many things, and MLR is, I mean, lucky to have folks like yourself to come in and sort of fill in all the mini cracks. I think not just like S&C or like coaching stuff, but like the culture, I think that someone like yourself can bring, and sort of the little day-to-day things that make a team successful, you know, as having positive interactions in the weight room, and individualization, things like that.
Well, let me just close my curtain slightly, because I'm facing east, and the sun has finally made its way out of the clouds.
All right. And
hopefully this won't change too much. There we go. That's better. I might be in a little bit of shadow now, but that's fine. Well, I'm really fortunate to be able to work in the United States. I mean, I moved initially with the NSCA back in, let me see. I went to the US and lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, where the NSCA headquarters was back in 1989. And unfortunately, there was some inconsistencies with my immigration documentation. And I got a call out of the blue saying that I was working on a tourist visa. And unbeknownst to me, I thought I was working legally, but it hadn't been done properly. So I was asked to leave the United States. If I wanted to come back, I could do it by myself, or they could do it for me, and I wouldn't be back for 5 years. So I'd always wanted to work in the United States. So that was the big thing for me. I've been a huge fan of American football, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in particular since the 1970s. So to be able to see the MLR start up 3 years ago now, And then fortunately, I guess it's like anything in the strength and conditioning industry. I think who you are should get you an interview, and what you know and who you know might get you a job as well. So Paul Healy, who's the head coach of the Sabercats, there's a Freudian slip there, he knew me through another guy who I'd worked for. So when he was appointed as the Sabercats head coach, he asked if I was available, and fortunately I was. It was one of those things that I was able to accept as quickly as I possibly could. The details associated with the position and to move to Houston. It was one of those surreal moments, really. All the planets had aligned correctly, and I was able to get over there. And as you say, Chris Toombs is working over there. Ian Gibbons is working there. Ed Cosner is working. Obviously, he's an American, but he is working with New Orleans. And you've got other people that coming from different parts of the world from a rugby perspective are coming in and giving of their knowledge and wisdom to grow the MLR. I mean, one of my biggest things is culture, and I've spoken over the last few years more and more so on culture, and moved away from the sets and reps, nuts and bolts of strength and conditioning, and looking at what underpins that, and looking at particularly what Brett Bartholomew has been doing as far as conscious coaching and buy-in and those sort of elements, and giving a more of an insight to the playing group. Why do we ask you to do those sort of things? And I think that's driving a culture of performance through looking at pillars of excellence. I mean, when I was with the Crusaders, and they're still there this day, we had 6 pillars of excellence. And you could ask any Crusader from any era over the last 15, 20 years what those pillars of excellence are, and they will tell you, boom. They don't even have to think about it. It's part of the DNA of the organization is those pillars of excellence. But if I was to try and lift those 6 pillars of excellence up from Canterbury and then plonk them down at the Houston Sabercats and expect them to flourish, then I'm deluded, because those 6 pillars of excellence, even though they are transferable, didn't develop in Houston. They were developed through the coaching group, the playing group within Canterbury here. So you have to then start looking at, well, how can I grow the culture in Houston, but with a Houston emphasis? And we had, I think with this season, we've got 14 different nationalities in our team. So you've got amazing interaction of people from around the world and with different levels of experience. We've got, for example, we've got a 19-year-old player from United Kingdom. We've got a 30-something-year-old player from Uruguay who's played 100 test matches for his country. So you've got a very, very wide expanse there from some veterans and all from rookies all the way through to massive veterans. And so it's important to discuss things with them and talk things through. And that's why I love having one-on-one chats with my playing group as frequently as I can, usually once a month. And that helps me to establish what they need as individuals within the team setting, and what have they been doing at Uruguay or Georgia or Scotland that may be able to be working here. So it's a constant, and I've learned a hell of a lot in the last probably 18 months from, as my mother would have told anyone, that you can even learn from a ignorant person. You can learn everything. I mean, going to conferences, reading books, you can pick up one thing if it's justifying why you do something currently, or is something, a brand new spark of idea that you get is going to set you off in a different direction as far as thinking is concerned, that's going to be great. So developing the culture, it's like, I'm sure you've read Legacy.
Yep.
So, and I was fortunate to live probably about 2/3 of that book in day to day when I was with the All Blacks. So what I see there is the stories they tell is like reminders of what I'd lived through as that phase of my career. And they talk about the rope, with the different colors of the rope, which you'll probably remember, which was the different cultural backgrounds of people who make up the All Black playing squad. So you had Maori, you had Samoan, you had white European, you had Cook Islanders, you had Tongan background. So all those cultures were represented by a different color rope, and they were put together and weaved until that rope became one strong unity. So that's what we're trying to do at the Sabercats, is not steal that rope idea, although it'd be pretty cool, but to metaphorically weave a whole group of individuals from disparate backgrounds, far off countries, into something that is representative of the Houston Sabercats. Because our plan is to try and make every Houstonian's second professional sport rugby. We don't care if they support the Texans as their number one sport, but we want them to support us as their number two sport. Or they might be baseball fans or soccer fans or whatever. But our goal is to try and to make that and to grow the sport of rugby within the community of Houston, which itself is such a multicultural city. So to have a multicultural team inside a multicultural city, then you've got a pretty good environment to hopefully germinate some seeds of cultural development and rugby for the town.
Yeah, it's always been a great mystery to me why Texas isn't better at rugby, or isn't almost sort of apprehensive to sort of take it on board. You know, it seems to have a lot of qualities that Texans enjoy. Just sort of broad stroking it, obviously, but I had a chance to coach sort of the last and only ITT teams here in America. The only thing that was going on called it was INSCRO. It's now NCR. I'm sure you'll become super familiar as you go through Houston and you catching college kids out of in your recruitment process. And but we got a chance to play there at the stadium in Houston and have a great sort of week of training and play 5 games in 3 days type of a situation. But the people of Houston, I think, are very accepting of lots of different kinds of folks, and rugby should definitely be on the radar there. As it's one of the biggest cities in the world. They've had to come together for their own tragedies and problems and issues that they've had. So and the setup there in Houston that you guys have is top notch. Amongst of all the MLR situations that I've seen and been a part of so far, is it's really set up for you guys to do something great there.
Well, the ownership group has done a phenomenal job. The quality of the surface of the playing field is just probably one of the best in the world that I've actually worked on. And then you go to our 2 practice fields, and they are basically the same. There's no real drop-off between different pitches that we work on. And this year we're going to be in the process of building our own gym on site. So we'll have our own weight room adjoining our practice field number 1. So we can actually transition out of the weight room straight onto the field with different sort of training activities. But it'll be right there. Last season we worked out of Lifestyle 360 down the road. And obviously it was a commercial gym, and you're hampered by commercial fitness center rules and regulations and bits and pieces, but we'll hopefully have our own facility up and running in the not too distant future. And then we can actually start thinking about hosting international teams in Houston for camps, training camps and things like that, if they're coming across to play the United States, or hopefully one day in hopefully not too distant future, I hope I live long enough to see it, a Rugby World Cup in the United States, which is, I think is the goal of us all. We all see what the Football World Cup did for soccer in the United States, and it just has continued to roll along from there. I can only imagine what a Rugby World Cup would do in the United States, having been there with the rugby for the last 12 months now, and seeing the development so quickly, and then how we can take this to a whole new level in when that occurs.
Yeah, it's. I think that Houston's one of the unique situations where they weren't too big for their britches initially. You know, they have got a great facility, and I know that a lot of work went into it, but they sort of chewable pieces, you know, that they've sort of gone through, and with a long-term goal of making it a world-class facility, as you mentioned. So where, you know, as other people sort of struggled for that sort of thing, and it can be hard, I think, for rugby in general in America to sort of get a foothold, a commercially viable foothold, you know, to do the things that are necessary to have a professional league that's sustainable, you know, that attracts players from all over and coaches from all over. And hopefully the goal would be to grow the sport to where we're, you know, competitive in international matches. But you know, we'll see. I mean, hopefully the World Cup would come here someday, but we seem to be sort of squabbling over who would get to host this match or that match, and where to go and what union gets paid and these sorts of things. And I think probably the biggest thing, as someone who's played rugby in America for 17 years now, is like sort of that sort of general attitude. And there's fewer people like yourself, or, you know, like just in general, that make things not about themselves, that want good things for their players and their coaches and for the game in general. We tend to sort of plonk ourselves down in the middle of a road and make people go around us and say, well, this is mine and I don't want to share it. And that might just be an American thing, you know. But the more I travel, the more people that I talk with, and you know, like looking outside of America, you know, like the people are coming here for rugby jobs. Like I'm happy to replace someone in another country with my little family and get a bit of experience, you know, and that sort of thing. But it just seems to be, for me, it'll be the thing that holds us back, you know, and that would ruin a World Cup bid would be just sort of fighting over scraps, you know, when the idea is that the whole country should be able to sit down at the table.
Well, I think, yeah, well, our biggest thing with Paul Healy, Campbell Johnston, who's our forwards coach, and Paul Emmerich, who's our skills coach, but defense coach as well, is to grow the situation that we have more homegrown Americans within the organization, within the team, and hence why our academy, Houston HTX, which is now up and running, will do that and fuel that sort of drive to get more and more American-born talent in the team itself. But it's also for us as coaches to grow the talent below us in our specific roles. So to have someone take over from me in the next 18 months, 2 years, that's American-born, has a good S&C background, but actually knows something about rugby at the same time. I mean, obviously, strength and conditioning as a profession, industry, call it what you will, developed in the United States. So you're going to have a huge number of people that are strength and conditioning coaches in the United States themselves, but they don't have necessarily that rugby background to look at strength and conditioning as a piece of the rugby puzzle, and to ensure that you're doing it to add value in this particular area, not to try and prove your own value, to quote Brett Bartholomew, to ensure that it's the right mix of strength training versus metabolic training versus anaerobic training versus speed, agility, and quickness type work, and to ensure that the skill levels are developed concurrently with all the physical attributes of the playing group. And also to have those guys maybe play themselves at some stage so they get a feel for the game. And I think that's the important element, where it's hard if you've never played the game to actually have a bit of an understanding about how squatting on a Tuesday impacts your scrum session on Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday. And if I'm doing 3 sets of 3 at 90% on my back squat on Tuesday, and I've got a scrum session at 4 p.m. that afternoon, it's almost exactly the same workout, but one's in a vertical plane and one's in a horizontal plane. So is it theoretical for you, as for myself, say, as head of performance, to say, well, let's flip-flop those sessions and let's do the scrum session in the morning, unit session in the morning, and then we'll take a slight hit in the afternoon for our strength session, but you'll still be pushing hard, but you won't necessarily be able to use 90%. You might have to drop back to 85%. And in the greater scheme of things, is a 5% loss in strength from the strength training session. Does that really matter when you've got a really good quality scrum session done in the morning now? So it's all those little things that make the difference, I think, in the team.
Yeah, you're making rugby players, not weightlifters.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
So I mean, you don't have to sell me anymore. I'll move to Houston as soon as you're sold me, coach. I'll be there.
Good man.
No, but yeah, it's that sort of. I had a good friend of mine that worked at Stanford, University, and they had obviously a very, sort of unique S&C situation with one guy sort of overseeing all the sports and individualized, down to the person and, the body type and that sort of thing. And learned a lot just from like piggybacking on emails or asking questions or whatever it might be. And it's like, hey, listen, like you got a 300 kilo squatter, across your offensive line, but can he move? He can't make it to the fourth quarter. So is 605, a 600 pound squat, great. Is 610 going to do anything for this athlete? Like
100%,
probably not, a lot. Got a chance to work with a guy named Rob Rogers when I was at NSCA.
Yeah, I know Rob from years gone. I shared a room with Rob back in about 1980 something.
I was very fortunate. I was one of the first paid internships at NSCA in 2009.
Oh, wow.
And I arrived in January, and in February they hired Rob to be the tactical strength conditioning coordinator.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Which was an amazing education for me, and just like yourself, just dropped so much in my lap and said, get to reading, like we're going to do this in the gym with all these guys. And, but you should catch up on some of this stuff. And, he takes no credit for it, but, basically ran the practical applied session for FMS out of St. Vincent's Sports Performance. And, so I had done, I got an FMS certification level 1 and 2 in San Francisco at one point. And I, was bored because Rob had given me every shortcut and every answer to all these things. And this is why, this is how and why. And, those guys took the Indianapolis Colts off of squats in their preseason programming for 6 weeks, which was, unbelievable. I was like, listen, like, you haven't earned the right to squat. These are all American NFL, all pro linemen.
Yep.
And, I think I played in a high school football game and lost some wrestling matches to a guy named Kyle Devon, who was on their offensive line at one point. And he was like, this kid was an unbelievable athlete in high school. And he's like, yeah, it was never experienced anything in his life, just
wow.
We're going to fix these issues. This is the core problem here. Like, you might lose some on your back squat, but what does that do for your injury prevention and longevity? And, they went to the Super Bowl like the next year. So obviously it worked out. Yeah. It's a needs-based profession, I think. And when you're not busy justifying your salary as a strength coach, I think that's when you get the most out of a program like that.
Well, it's interesting you say that because obviously Rob Rogers is one of the legends of this industry, and probably should be more well known than he actually is, but because of who he is as a person, he probably wouldn't want that to be the case, which says volumes about him. But in one program, I won't say which program, we had a player that was squatting 283 kilos, and he was a tight head prop, but he would give 3 scrum penalties a game when the loose head started applying pressure, and he'd just pop. And he wanted to get to 300 kilograms as his goal, one of those big numbers. And it took so long to convince him that you're strong enough, but it's not transferring. So it's not going to be a point putting 17 more kilos on your squat just so you can get the magic 300. If you can't stay down and scrummage properly, that's your core job as a tight head, is to scrummage properly and to set a platform up. And if you can't do that, we'll get someone who's not as strong, but who can actually stay down to do the job. So it's up to you. Let's transition you from a vertical plane to a horizontal plane, and maybe do some prowler work, or get a specific scrum truck or something like that to actually work that level of strength that we need you to actually be able to do in a game situation. And he finally understood where that was coming from. But people do get obsessed by numbers, and I mean, I've just posted something in our team communication portal through SportsU the other day, and that I don't chase numbers. I'm not a metrics sort of guy. I'm probably an older generation. What do you need to do to make you a better rugby player sort of guy? And does that mean that we do only 2 sessions in the gym a week? But does it need for you? We need 4. Again, we're getting back to individualization again, which I think it's where the conversations need to always come back to. That who am I as a strength and conditioning coach, head of performance? Who am I doing these things for? Am I doing them for me, or am I doing them for you as a player? And how do we make you a better rugby player? That's part and parcel of my initial chat with every player, which I'll have when I get back to Houston, is that who is the best player in your position in world rugby? And the wonderful thing, I've done this in numerous teams, in numerous countries around the world, in numerous different languages with interpreters in some situations. No one has ever said, yeah, that's me, coach. I'm the best player in my position in the world. And I've been fortunate enough to coach some of the best players in their position in the world. And they've actually never said themselves. So, which is the great thing about rugby and the people who play the game. So in saying that, you then say, well, why is that person the best player in your position in world rugby? Is it because they're technically so good, or is it because they're physically so good, or do they have great feet? Are they good accelerators? Do they have great levels of strength? Blah, blah, blah. So what do you need to do to start approaching where that player is? And then we formulate the design of the program for the next month based around that conversation. So now I've got a high level of compliance and a really high level of buy-in, because we just tailored your entire month plan to what you need to do to be the best in the world. And that's where the conversations generate. And that's why I love doing what I do, because my why is getting out of bed every day to try and make someone better than they were yesterday. And by having those conversations and sharing ideas, I mean, over this period of time where people have been remotely programming, I've just said, right, guys, here's Jim Vendler's 531. Have a read through it. Maybe it's the program for you to run for the next wee while. Or here's Westside original programming. Maybe that's the way you need to go. Do you want to train 4 days a week? Do you want to train 3 days a week? Do you have access to a weight room which has got more than 100 kilos of bar weight that you can actually use? Yep, okay, bang, try this one. Try Mark Ripeto's programming, something like that. And I've been fortunate enough to pick these books up over the years, as we all do, and some sit by without being open for a wee while, but then you can just flip over and say, oh yeah, hey, look at that, that's a great idea. How about you do this? And then I'll bring my programming in as we come into the pre-season. But they've got exposed to different things to grow their knowledge base. And players today are far more knowledgeable when they were even 15 years ago about strength and conditioning. So by including them into the discussion about programming for them, then you've got far greater acceptance of the ideas that you have. And if you've opened your mind to the possibilities, there might be, like we have a prop coming from Georgia. Georgia the country, not Georgia the state.
Yeah.
And he'll give me ideas which I've never thought about. He could bring some really cool warm-up ideas from the Georgia national program that we can actually implement in our warm-ups for our contact sessions, for example. And then we can actually utilize him as a coach within a playing organization and playing together and learning from each other. And then the whole thing starts growing again. So it's like that old thing that the mind is like a parachute. It really only works when it's open. And if you close it down, then if you stop learning or stop wanting to know different things, you basically start dying. And I've learned so much from so many different people over the last few years. It's invigorating to be still in and around people and still to be considered relevant, to try and add value into people's programs and people's lives in general.
Yeah, that is a beautiful way to put it. It's something that I aspire to for sure. As lovely as San Diego is, but getting out there and that experience, I don't think there's a better teacher than going to a new place, introducing yourself and getting stuck in and learning things, off of people, because ultimately that's how you learn who you are and what you want to do. I think is taking that stuff on and discarding what's not useful and applying what is. But when I speak to people about the training stuff, it's usually like, what is the intent? Like what are your intentions for this training session? And how you said it was, how does this apply? As the why, like why are we doing this? So if you can answer those questions, then you can usually sell someone on, this is why we're going to do this grueling work. It's going to be long and hard, and you won't like it at first, but it's a lot better when you're producing things on the field, and athletes are doing well and you're winning games and scoring tries and pushover, scrums and things like that. Like that's that feeling of watching your athletes, succeed on that level is, gets you going, wakes you up in the morning.
As I listened to Joe Ken say at an NSCA conference a couple of years ago, it's easy to be strong and powerful in the first minute of the first quarter. Yeah. But we need you to be strong and powerful in the 15th minute of the fourth quarter to the same degree. And if we can get you there, there's not too many teams that are going to roll over the top of us. So from taking that into a rugby perspective, no one likes metabolic work. I mean, no one wants to do VO2 grids. No one wants to do repeat speed sessions and put under the level of metabolic stress that people get put under with that. But that final 20 minutes of the game will indicate who's got that reserves of metabolic energy to be able to roll over the top of teams and to basically put them to the sword. And that's the important factor that we're trying to develop, an attitude where the work we do gets you battle ready come those final 20 minutes. And that's the time that we want to make our time as a team, is those final 20 minutes. and hopefully we're either ahead or close to it, and we know in our own heads and our own hearts that, yeah, we can win this game. And I think the really, really good teams have got that. It's confidence, it's not arrogance, but it's confidence because they've done it before and they know that they've got that extra little bit in them that can actually go up a gear. And you see it all the time with the All Blacks.
All sort of teams extreme confidence.
Yeah, it's confidence to know that we'll pull together, even if we're 17 points down, we can still win this game. And you often see they do. So that's great to see. And that's what we're trying to develop.
Yeah, as an athlete like that has been on some teams, you know, like teams like that, you know, where you feel like you never feel like when you think about it now, you know, like we're never thinking about losing that game, and there's no time left, and the ball's in your hands, you know, and any mistake is the end. And yeah, the great teams, when you're playing in the moment, like you're never thinking about, oh, we're not going to do this. It's just like it's going to happen. We're not sure how it's going to happen yet. You know, we're just cracking away until something pokes through. So yeah, that's an unreal sort of gift, I think, to give athletes. And it starts like you said, starts now, starts in the preseason, and you've got some great tools for buy-in. I think the Houston will be very lucky to have you on campus for the next wee while.
Thank you. I think I'm lucky to be there myself. It's great to be a part of something that everyone's pulling in the same direction, and it's great about being part of being something bigger than yourself, which I think is an important cornerstone of my philosophy has been developed over the years as well. That and hopefully that comes through with the work I do, and not only just in with my team, in the information I share and my writing. In that, it's important to grow everyone. As again, I'll go back to Brett Bartholomew because I love some of the things he talks about. Is that the rising tide raises all ships, and this is what we want to try and do. We want to make rugby a more known sport in the United States in particular, but we also want to look at the strength and conditioning programs that underpin performance on the field to be more rugby specific within our teams, and to really make everyone more competitive, and then make for greater entertainment and spectacles for the people who come and watch us play, which is the other side of the coin as well, because it is a business after all. And our business is being successful on the field so that we can actually sell out Aviva Stadium in Houston every single week that we play at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, you guys got a great start, I feel like, and it looks like MLR is set to start in March 2021.
Yep.
I've read some press clippings here in San Diego. Legion will start soon, like in November. I imagine you guys will assemble around then, sort of centered around the winter time. Not sure you'll get your classic Kiwi 2-week break around Christmas.
No, I don't think we will this year, but that's fine.
That was always one thing I loved about, like, everyone just sort of, my birthday is December 29th, so I sort of take the week anyway, because no one's around and nothing's open. So sort of out of necessity, but I always loved that. It's just like, no, we're calling it until after New Year's. We'll see you guys later. I always thought that was a fantastic attitude.
I remember playing games when I was with Edinburgh on Boxing Day was one year. It was 26th of December, day after Christmas. And New Year's Eve, we had to play a game in Italy. So we were getting back into Edinburgh just as the bells were tolling midnight on New Year's Eve. So, there was no rest for the wicked living in the United Kingdom, I tell you that.
Yeah, well, I think that they're going to, maybe having the way things have gone, they're sort of looking at competition schedules. And, I've heard a lot of people talk about sort of reducing the number of games because there's so many of these games that are just sort of filling in the schedule, to make a sponsor happy, or, this competition or that competition. And obviously Super Rugby this year, quite different, but lots of developments there with South Africa aligning with Europe, it looks like. And
You know, all those things are going to come to pass now. And I think that, you know, I mean, New Zealand has to be the same way, really, where there's so much local talent that I think people get up out of bed and go to a rainy day game to watch the kids that they've been watching, you know, the last 10 years on a Saturday, you know, as you go through and as you promote and go to the next level. And I think that that's something that's pretty desperately missing in American rugby, is having rugby heroes, you know, that you can watch on TV, that sort of thing, and idolize and look up to. But then also that sort of that, you know, the kid down the street, you know, that I know that guy, you know, and I've watched him for years, and now he's going to be playing on Saturdays on TV, that sort of thing. So not just having games for game's sake, you know, which we can't really do in this country anyway, because it's so big. So just sort of retracting a bit, you know, and I think, you know, USA Rugby filing for bankruptcy and sort of condensing a bit is probably a blessing in disguise, really. Like, as someone who's paid dues to them for the last 17 years, I think that, like, the goal now and the intention of what they're trying to do is a lot more plausible and achievable. And I think that, yeah, with the advent of the MLR and, you know, third year in and surviving COVID, that sort of thing, you know, I think that that's big wins, big positives for American rugby. So
yeah, we're looking forward immensely to getting back there and rolling this program along, and getting back with my team. Actually, it's I've been able to do some work with Canterbury this year since I've been home, and I think I'm the oldest intern in history, but it's been great being with those guys and helping out where I can, but and also sort of giving them ideas that I'll be using come the start of our preseason in Houston, and seeing that they actually work, and be able to put them into place when I get back to Houston and go from there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, when you get there, you'll meet a guy named Taylor Howden.
Yeah, Taylor's one of them. Yeah, I've met Taylor already. Taylor's a great guy.
Great guy. Zach Pangelina is another guy. He's from San Diego, played here at OMBAC, and
Right.
So those two guys. Zach is an unbelievable athlete. I'm sure you'll have lots of fun with him.
Oh, he's a quality
Taylor,
guy.
you'll probably have to sharpen the stick a bit, in my experience. But overall, he's a fantastic guy, great teammate, and say hi to them for me. But Coach, thank you so much. I don't want to take up your whole day, but I really appreciate getting the chance to sit with you, just sort of talk shop, and to sort of meet you is a great treat for me.
Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure for me to actually sit down and chat, and you're welcome in Houston anytime. If you're in our neck of the woods, just to come on in, and I'm sure we can find a place for you to stay, and you can come to any practices that we're involved with. So I'd like to extend that to you and to anyone that you know what's come down our way, and see how we do our thing.
Yeah, 100%. You know, with Iron Neck, I run a very large territory for them and handle lots of different things now, between like programming, exercise stuff, and affiliate programs. So I will make an excuse to get to Houston, I'm sure. And
look forward to it.
We'll be there. All right.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very, very much for contacting me, and thank you very much for reading all my stuff over the years, and appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Thanks.